Welcome to What Would Sabrina Say? I'm Sabrina Dong, and I'm excited you're joining me today. In this podcast, I dive into mental health topics on relationships and overall well-being. With over 20 years of experience as a licensed clinical social worker, I share insights and invite expert guests who are passionate about making a positive difference. I started this podcast because I was frustrated with the often misleading or recycled information in social media involving self-help and the mental health field. My goal is to provide you with genuine, useful content that's educational and informative. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you find our conversations both enlightening and empowering. I'm glad you're here. Hi, welcome to What Would Sabrina Say? I'm your host, Sabrina Dong. Today we have here with us licensed mental health counselor, Jerome Romero. Jerome, thanks so much for joining us today.
I'm so excited to be here, Sabrina, to talk about one of my favorite topics in the whole wide world.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you here to talk about IFS, internal family systems. If you'd just like to share a bit about yourself and where you practice out of, we can jump in such a great topic.
Yeah, so my name is Gilbert Jerome Romero Mewharter. Big long name and big long title, right? Licensed mental health counselor. I have been serving families and adults in many different ways, from a special educator to a mental health consultant to now a full-time counselor. So in my work, I have really found that internal family systems really gives access to many people who struggle with that term mental health and learn more about mental health through this process. I am finding that I'm working a lot more with men, and men find this process at first a little bit like, this is really weird, but I don't have to talk about my feelings. So I think it's less intrusive to them, and it feels more natural rather than like, how are you feeling today? Okay, not the way to talk to a guy in therapy.
Right.
So that's just a little bit of background on me. And so I just want to start with internal family systems is really a therapeutic model that helps people understand and heal their inner world by recognizing different parts of themselves and accessing a calm, compassionate core self that can lead to healing. So one of the amazing things about IFS is it doesn't label parts as bad or dysfunctional, and that these parts of you have protective intention, even when that behavior is harmful. So like drinking, porn addiction, gambling, all these different harmful behaviors, they're really serving a protective intention. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to get behind that and understand, okay, why does it feel it has to show up this way? What does it need from us? And I think what I really love about IFS is that it assumes that there's nothing wrong with you. Your system, your system is just adapted to survive.
It's understanding on how our mind, our nervous system really, like you said, helps us to survive, to protect us from pain, from discomfort, from trauma we might have experienced, and just learning how do we work with these parts.
Exactly. So one of the benefits is just that it builds self-compassion naturally. And so instead of forcing positive talk, like you could think about this like we do through CBT, right? You could think about it this way. That compassion emerges organically. So the more we understand the function of these parts, the more the clients are able to relate to their inner critics or anxious parts with curiosity rather than really judging them and trying to get rid of them, right?
And I can appreciate when, it's easy for us to be our own worst critics, to be judgmental, how to get and shift people at a place of being more compassionate. And in IFS, it helps, with doing some of that work.
Yeah, well, one of the things that we know is that self-compassion is linked to better emotional regulation and resilience. So we really want to understand that in IFS, compassion isn't taught, it's really uncovered.
So it's uncovered, like you're discovering it. You're learning how to be more compassionate. It's already there. It's kind of just getting to it.
Exactly. We say witnessing in IFS. We're witnessing this part of us story, the story that it's been telling us. And we begin to understand, like, again, it has positive intention, but the only skill that it has is this behavior that people have identified as a problem.
Right. And how can understanding about ourself in parts help? Like how can IFS help someone? Like, is it people if there's depression? I'm learning that it helps bypass an addiction. Like how do you see the benefits and how can it help to learn about our parts?
Definitely. I think one of the things you brought up earlier was, the great effects that it has for addressing trauma in attachment rooms. So IFS allows trauma to be approached gently and without re-traumatizing the client, right? Clients don't relive the experiences, they witness and they unburden. So really going not to that experience, but going to that part and saying, okay, what is it that happened that you feel you have to continue to address the problem in this way? And then letting them know sometimes that we become frozen in those moments. Meanwhile, our self has moved on and learned other skills that have been helpful. But this one part of us only knows this one way of being, right?
Right. And I was wondering if you can share about maybe we could touch on the different parts and what they are in their roles briefly.
Definitely. So, probably the most important part is the protector part. There's a manager, right? I always say they're the person that gets us through the day. So they have their checklist and they're like, okay, yep, got your clothes, got your wallet, all those things. Again, they want to make sure that life is running smoothly. Then we also have our firefighter parts. So their motto is at all costs. And one of the things I like to talk about with clients is if a firefighter is coming through your house because it is on fire and you have your grandma's 100-year-old china in the way, that they don't care about that china. They're worried about that you're getting out safely. So they are going to run through that china to save you. And that's sometimes what our parts do, right? By gambling, by addiction, all these other ways of not coping because they're out to rescue us at all costs.
Right. It's to help us not feel that pain and suffering, no matter if it is a healthy way of maybe coping or not. It's just about let's not do this. Let's shut it down and to protect ourselves.
Exactly. And then the other part of us is what we call the self. The self is calm, curious, confident, and compassionate. That healing happens from within and is not imposed by us as the therapist. The therapist doesn't do the healing, the client self does. I think one of the other parts that we need to talk about is just those exiles, right? So those are the parts of us that cause not only external chaos, but also internal chaos for all these other parts, right? So an example might be anxiousness, right? So I don't know about you. Sometimes when I get really anxious, I can't find my wallet, my keys. I'm trying to get out the door, and it just gets worse and worse and worse, right? The dog starts barking. I'm running through the house. The manager hates this part. So sometimes what happens is that part will get exiled, meaning, I say, he's put off on a desert island. There's no way to get to him. The only way is by boat. And so sometimes, though, the anxiety part slips in, right? And then causes all this chaos. And so our parts don't want that anymore. So they keep fighting against this, which of course causes the chaos. However, that anxious part of us is part of us. So the more we push it away, the more they fight harder to get back in the family. So once we help that anxious part learn, like, you don't have to be on high alert all the time. You can be there as kind of like a warning, right? Like, hey, you're gonna need your wallet. If you get pulled over, we're gonna need that license. So can you double check that's in your pocket? So again, helping them understand they are welcome. They are not bad. But again, we want to try and give people a map for their inner world and how to understand how these different parts show up.
Right. And I think, there's a lot of people who want to learn and understand about the self, right? And how that works, or how to tap into it, or how to know when we're making decisions by the true self and maybe not by the protectors or what we think we want, right? And so I love IFS and how it really helps people understand what the self is, what it looks like. And I love, I heard Janina Fisher talk about the self almost like that's something that never gets touched by trauma, by harm, because of all the other parts. And you almost see like a little pilot light that's on all the time shining. And it's just like, your pilot light's always on, and it's always going, and it's always there. And it's finding a way to kind of work through and understand some of these parts and what they're there for, and really experience the self truly without all this kind of chaos, right? Or anxiety or stressors. I was wondering if you could touch more on about the self. I know there's also concepts in IFS, and I wish we had more time on all of them. But
No, definitely. I think one of the most important things that you just said was that we understand these parts. In therapy, a lot of times we're working towards behavior management. We're trying to extinguish the behavior, get rid of it. But as we go in, right, like, we want to have what we call self energy. We want to be present with these parts so we can get to know them, understand their story, so that way we can better meet their need as the self, and also let them know you serve an important purpose. You've gotten me this far. And when we're what we would call, I can't think of the word, meshed with that part, sometimes it's hard to see it. But when we're able to separate ourselves, when we're able to honestly look at the part for what it is, then we are better able to address its need. A great example of this is thinking about, sometimes we think about these parts as big and scary. So we run away from these feelings a lot of times. Instead, FS calls us to turn around and look at them. And we turn around and look at them. Sometimes they're just scared younger parts, wearing these big scary masks. And when we turn around and we say, hey, you don't have to be scary for me to pay attention to you. Take off the mask. Tell me the story. What is it that I can use to help you? I was thinking of Circle of Security's bigger, stronger, wise, and kind. So I always say that's the self. When we're bigger, we're stronger, we're wise. When we can tell this part, we can handle this. We know how to do this now. We've been to therapy a couple of times. We have some skills.
Right. And I think too, sometimes parts might not be scary, but parts might feel so comforting to be there to protect us that we're scared of what it's like to interact day to day without them, without anxiety there to be that big alarm or feeling like, well, what's there to protect us if this part doesn't keep showing up?
Definitely. So another example could be someone with procrastination might discover a part that's afraid of failure, and another that uses avoidance to protect them from shame. When those parts are understood rather than fought, the behavior shifts naturally. It's again saying, I'm not bad. The way I'm approaching whatever it is just not working.
Right. And so to deal with shame can be a tough one for all of us, right? Shame, guilt. And it sounds like IFS is a great tool to help work through some of these intense emotions and get to the bottom as to why we're avoiding it or maybe, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
Have you ever done work around IFS with like younger people, teens, kids? Like, I just wondering about helping them understand about the parts.
Yeah, definitely. So with kids, right, kids don't have a lot of those walls that adults do. So we might talk to them directly about like, tell me the feeling that happens when, you get frustrated. What happens in your body? And I think that's the other piece I love around IFS is that it's also somatic, right? We have them locate, where do you feel that part in your body? And as we go through that experience, we can actually see the body relax. And the client might even say this, right? So even in working with children, it might be like, they might take that deep breath. So we might call that out saying, wow, once you said that, I saw your body relax. How does it feel to have that feeling speak? So we might do some drawings around what that looks like as well. So helping them understand that these feelings are just parts of them, not good or bad, that we're just here to understand them.
I'm just wondering if you could talk about IFS and the structure, typical number of sessions. Is there home practice that people would be doing? Sometimes when we're contemplating, we're wanting to work on things, but wondering about the time and energy taken into growth. Yeah, just wondering, can you touch on that?
Yeah, as with any therapy, right, we know that it's going to depend on the client. Some people have really good awareness, or you have men like myself who are like, I don't trust you. I don't know you. I don't want to share my feelings. I just want to get out of here because my partner told me I had to come. Otherwise, there'd be trouble. So I think what's really important is that there is a structure for this. And I think this points to the importance of the training behind internal family systems. Now, there are a lot of great people who have natural instinct, and I don't discount that. I myself thought I had great instinct. However, over time, as I was trained as a therapist, I found out how much I really missed as someone who was just a lay person. So someone who is IFS trained is going to provide that structure that IFS needs. Because if we go too fast and don't get permission of the system, if we jump in and we just say, how are your parts doing today? Those parts can react in such a way that they shut down the entire system. They don't want to talk. They don't want to be heard. I think one of the most important things about self is that we need to make sure that we're in self. I know sometimes what happens initially in this process is that this is the first time that a lot of these parts have been recognized. So when we are asking the client, is this part aware of you and your presence, double checking that there aren't other parts in the way. That really is a single part.
Right. And we were mentioning about number of sessions, and it just depends on the work, the goals, right? The person.
Yeah. And again, I know I keep going back to this, the importance of training. But I think that's what happens in the training. You're able to recognize when other parts are showing up, and you're able to say, like, it sounds like there's another part in here that kind of has an agenda and wants this part to get in line. So I just want to double check that we're operating from ourself and that we're not operating from a part that has an agenda and wants this part to get in line, or else it goes back right to the island. We want to make sure that we're in self. Again, idea of being bigger, stronger, wiser, and kind.
Mm. I really like how you're able to connect that around, the circle, connection and sharing what that looks like with the self. And I think sometimes, even for me, it's hard to wrap around. Like, we've learned about the self, like it's just one thing, right? And so I think IFS just helps to make sense of us, and that there are different parts with different responsibilities or ways of protecting us. And yeah, so I think sometimes it's hard to unlearn about the self and as a whole. Just wondering what your thoughts were around that.
Yeah, I like to compare it to like the different parts of our body, right? Like we have a hand, but that's not a separate part of us, right? That's still a part of us. We have legs and feet, right? But those are two different parts, but they're still parts of us. So helping them understand that, think our emotions, right, are parts of us, and they serve different functions as well. And so I think once we can show like we can still be one thing with many complexities, right? That it's like, uh, I think one of the things I love about IFS is I actually inform the movie Inside Out. So I always say, like, who's at the control planner? Who is really hitting that button hard of going nuclear, right? So that's just another way of explaining it, especially with kids, right? Kids love that movie, but I'm finding out adults and guys kind of like it too, especially, when the wife and the husband are sitting across from each other, they can totally relate. And sometimes they're picking up on, I get it now.
Exactly. It just helps to give more insight, or like you said, it's a mapping out, right? It's showing a map and talking about, what's happening and ways to confront and lean in and be curious and explore versus avoid, push away, repress, shut down, ignore things.
Yeah. IFS works by changing that internal relationship to the parts, creating those thoughts and behaviors. So again, rather than running away, we're facing them and we're saying, hey, why are you acting this way?
I was wondering if we could touch on the difference between working with a counselor who's IFS informed versus one who is IFS trained. And even myself looking at, IFS training, and there's different certification, but like, what would the difference be when you are looking for the help to do that deeper work? So maybe we can touch on, an IFS informed therapist versus one that can provide the actual intervention.
Yeah, I think one of the big things is recognizing the different parts that can show up. Like I did my own work with the IFS with someone who was trained. And then like I became IFS informed, not realizing that there is a structure to this. There is a way of going through these steps. But also, we are trained, one of the biggest things that was pushed was pausing and creating that relationship with those parts. And sometimes, again, people can have great intuition, but it takes training to notice when we're not in self. And that's when it becomes dangerous to proceed. If we don't know how to use direct access in a proper way, we can actually cause harm. And that's not what we want to do. We want to make sure that people use this in such a way that's helpful and that people can understand it when they're not with you. And I think that's another piece, is that the goal is for people to leave therapy understanding their parts and understanding new parts as they arrive on their own, to leave therapy, right? The CBT, of course, we need those skills. And when combined, IFS works really well with the EMDR. Again, IFS is not in opposition to any of these. It can combine and complement those treatment modalities. I think the difference between a trained individual and someone who's not is someone who can say, okay, at this point we need to pause. We need to teach a skill before we proceed, because if we don't have that skill in place, we may be re-traumatizing the client. We may cause harm that we're not aware of. And we want to make sure that when a client leaves, of course, they may feel uncomfortable, but that they have the skills to manage what happens when they leave the office.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people to know that difference in thinking about, what type of work they're wanting to do and explore, and when they're curious about it. And so if they are hearing a therapist is informed and has maybe some knowledge background versus actually went through the training through IFS themselves, right, and experienced that, and then receive the supervision, big difference in experience.
Yes, and even, one of my colleagues has been doing this work for years and still gets supervision around this. He, you know, he is a level 3, and he still says that there's still things that I don't feel confident in doing. So I think ongoing supervision, not just, I'm done, I've reached the top of the mountain, right? It's going back and saying, okay, now that I'm at this level, where do I need to improve?
The right training makes a big difference in how we deliver that service to clients. And it's great, I think, if you're a client out there and you're wanting to learn more, to research on it and know what questions to ask a counselor if you're wanting to use IFS in a therapy session, and being okay to ask about certification.
And the IFS Institute has a whole directory of people who are uh, and their levels. So there's 3 levels. So the first one is you've received the training, you're practicing, you're using it. Level 2, you're going to learn about how it works with specific populations. And then at level 3, you're doing supervision of others. You're able to apply this model in multiple settings. So that resource is just so helpful. Psychology today is great as well to find therapists. And again, I think you brought up that great point of asking about certification is okay. This is your therapy. And if this modality is important to you, people who are confident are going to take that as a compliment that you're asking about those things.
Definitely. I was just wondering how people can reach you if they're interested to learn more about IFS, or if they'd like to receive your services out in Washington.
Thanks so much for asking. Definitely. So my website is onemind1heartcounseling.com. You can fill out a form. It describes all the different services they can offer. And also, I'm always happy to have a conversation.
So much, Jerome, for joining us today, and really like the name of your practice, One Mind, One Heart. So be sure to check it out and learn more about IFS. Thanks again. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Sabrina. You as well.